Okay, to paint a curl on this rose petal, I'm using hot pressed 90-pound weight paper. It's lovely and fine and smooth and it's great for painting detail like this. I'm saturating the actual curl itself with cold water, and size 3 brush just to get into all those little small spaces. I'm wetting this so that when I drop the pink wash on, it'll have a soft edge. What you need to make sure is that this stays moist enough so that when you were adding subsequent dark accents in the shadows and folds, that we're still working into a moist area. It doesn't need to be soaking wet, and if it's damp, it's too dry. So what we're aiming for is somewhere in the middle where there's still a faint sheen on the paper. So I'm going to allow that to soak in for half a minute or so. Really make sure you've accurately hugged the outline so that the water bead is right to the edge there. The paint won't flow anywhere else apart from where you've wetted the paper, okay? So that's soaking in. While that's soaking in, I'm just going to mix up a wash of rose madder and a little speck of raw sienna just to warm it up. It's a very soft pinky peach colour. And again, it's not dripping off my brush, but it's got this sort of the consistency of very thin cream, I'd say. Okay. Just looking at my paper, and there's still a little bit too much surface water on that curve. So I'm just tilting the board a few degrees this way and that way, just to share the water out a bit more. And what you can do, if it really is way too wet, is you can come along with a thirsty brush, which is a brush that's been tapped on the base of a jug to get rid of all the air bubbles. Then flick the excess off and dry the hairs, and then you can then just suck up some excess water with it. It acts as a sort of water eraser. Just takes away just that excess. Wipe again and just take off a little bit more. That water's had plenty of time to soak in now to the petals. I'm going to add my wash. I'm hugging the outline and letting the capillary action of the paper take the paint. As you can see, it's flaring, but it's not going too far. And I'll put some pink on the other side, on the top side of the petal. I want to try and aim to leave the central core of the petal white, so that would be my highlight. So there's still some white in the centre there. So we're already getting the effect of a curl, hopefully. Straight into that, you need to work quickly. I'm going to mix darker and more viscous rose madder, genuine, and I saw a little tiny speck of sap green, because green is opposite rose madder on the colour wheel, and this will start to be my shadow colour now. So I'm going to drop this shadow colour into some of these arches, some of these like folds and curls, just to accentuate where it's going out of the light. It's quite a dramatic curve there. And then as I'm coming around the fatter part of the furl, I'm thinning the paint out. I'm going thicker there where it curves more radically again. And then again I'll put some of this darker colour on the top part of the petal where it's curling. I'm making some parts thin and some parts thick, just for variety, to make it look natural. And then lastly, I'm just going to let the paint run by holding it about 60 or so degrees, letting the paint run over and give that curling effect, running that way, and then I'm going to let it run back the other way. Okay, so just tilt your board and let that run. And then hopefully we've got the look of a curling petal there. That's just a very basic step-by-step for you, okay? Okay, so now we're ready to strengthen up the curl of the rose petal a bit more, because I felt that the base is a bit too dark in comparison to the curl. I just want to make them a bit more unified. They look a bit too separate at the moment. The base is bone dry, and the bleed is nice. I've got a darker passage right under the curl, and then it's slightly paler near the sort of base there. As I said, there's some reflected light around. It would always be darker right under the curl, okay, to push the curl forward. So to harmonise these two, I'm going to show you how you can very gently re-wet an area that is bone dry and then add further touches of colour. The secret is in wetting it very quickly and lightly. So with a suitably sized brush for the job, start very lightly introducing water to it. Try not to scrub, just lay the water along the surface as lightly as you can, and then the wash underneath won't be disturbed at all. Make sure you refill your brush every few strokes, because you want to be laying that water on effortlessly and quite generously, because believe me, this 100% cotton rag paper will soak it up, and what you don't want to have to do then is go passing the water on another second time or a third time, which will risk dislodging the wash underneath. I've just missed a little bit there, so very carefully just going to introduce some water to it. You need to look by inclining your head to a light source to see if that petal has got a bit of a sheen on it. If it's gone damp again straight away, just introduce a tiny bit more water so that you've got this sheen appearing again. And then we're ready to drop in some tiny little bits of colour to match up the base. So I'm using a smaller brush. This is a size 0 brush, and I'm just picking up some of this darker rose madder. I'm adding a bit more rose madder, another little droplet of water, that's all, and a tiny speck of Winsor of sap green, just to pop in some shadow. Running it along there. Just going to kill the white edge there. I'm rinsing my brush, flicking it. I'm not touching it into any drying material like a flannel or a tissue. I'm just going to encourage that dark patch to flare out a bit more. Rinse again, flick my brush, and with this very moist brush just encourage that to blend in a bit more. I need a little bit of the darker colour along there as well. Rinse my brush, flick, and then just touch into the edge of that passage I've just painted and blend it in really softly. And I think that's keyed it in a little bit better. I'll just zoom out and zoom back in. I think it's holding together a bit more. That's jumping out at me there. So I'm just going to put a bit more colour in and take it down into that curve. Rinse my brush and then touch into that and blend it into this sort of bulge then, for want of a better word, on the petal. And that's a bit hard, so I'm going to soften that with this moist brush, just encourage it up into the curve a bit more. And I think I'm going to stop there. Okay, so that's a demonstration of just a simple petal, one part of a rose. It's a very sort of slow way of building it up. It's just one way of working with watercolour.